Hi, this is Doug Vogt from the Die-Hole Foundation. This is the final video in Series 2 on the Hebrew alphabet. It's the culmination of what is in the book and a couple of things that are not in the book that I figured out a little later. Anyway, we're going to cover in this the dating of the Torah and the technology, who the people were who originally created the symbols, what kind of program the Torah actually is, and how I think it works, defining the 8 dimensions and how the die-hold works. The die-hold is the name of the computer, basically, that contains the information for this operating system and, in essence, plays out the universe. Answering the 3 most important questions in the universe, namely, why was the universe created? If God created the universe, then who created God? And then finally, what is man's purpose in the universe? These are 3 questions that physics could never hope to answer. So let's get started. I'm going to try to do this thing within a half an hour. Good luck on that. Anyway, we're going to cover 2 chapters, chapters 4 and 12 in God's Day of Judgment book. That was from 10 years ago. And 7, 9 and Appendix A in the current book, Creation of the Hebrew Alphabet. And the video is intended for both scientists, computer scientists, those guys working on quantum computing. This book was indexed was a QA 70 or 76.8A9, which is quantum computing. It's also for theologians and the general public. It answers some of the questions that no one before could ever answer because you had the wrong science. Okay, in slight review, the 22 letters are divided into basically 3 groups. The first group is the 10 letters, 10 views around the bias of this toroid, around the edge like this every 45 degrees, and the top of the bottom. 8 of the letters, these, are basically viewing it at this angle, this reciprocal of 52.66 degrees or 34 some odd degrees. And finally, the least used letters in the Torah are these, and there's a reason why they're the least used, and I will hopefully remember to cover that and explain why. The 22 letters are broken down into 10, 8, and 4. The 10 letters form an 8-sided prism with the top and the bottom. 8 of them form an octahedron. And finally, the last 4 just form the top of a pyramid offset by 45 degrees. And when you look down on it, you have the Mandela shape. Looking at this, you have the Jewish star, the Star of David, and that's really what he was telling us. Let's see. The other thing I covered in video 2C was when I replaced these planes for the letters in the Torah, they resembled electronic components such as transistors and other components, even some that are used, schematics for quantum computing, our current very primitive stage of quantum computing. So, a little review on the theory of multidimensional reality, in case some of you think that I'm wrong, that the universe is the product of information. This I discovered in 1989, the 6 blank periods in space, when the stars basically nova, you can't see them for about 900 to 1100 years. The distance between 4 of the 6 were 12,068 years in between, and that matches up with the ice ages and polar reversals on the planet. This is the solar cycles. Each solar cycle is 11.09 years. 8 of them is a Gleisberg cycle. You can see pretty clearly here. 136 Gleisberg cycles is our magic number, 12,068. This is the only 2 things I need to prove that the universe is the product of information. Don't really need much more than that, especially when I couple this reversal stuff, the blank periods, with the polar reversals on the planet. It's over with. In order for me to figure out the model that created the Hebrew alphabet, these 22 letters, I had to have had the same philosophy of the universe as the people who created them. Otherwise, there'd be no way I could ever figure this thing out. You have to know what you're doing and why they did this thing. Anyway, that's the important part I want you to understand. If you think I'm wrong, you're going to have to come up with a competing philosophy of the universe that creates a model that creates those 22 letters, or try to prove why a late Bronze Age people could come up with it, or even why they'd want to come up with it, which I don't think you can do. This is an example of lunacy. This is how you know that your science has reached a dead end. When you say something as ridiculous as this, that the universe shouldn't exist, and I'll read some of this for those who are on cell phones who can't read this. One of the big questions about the universe is how the first matter formed after the Big Bang. I'm going to explain what caused the Big Bang. You'll understand. Because particles and antiparticles annihilate one another when they come into contact. If they were exactly equal measures of both, the universe shouldn't exist, or wouldn't exist, at least not in the form that we know today. This quote came from this guy. It was a NASA release. I read it. All of our observations find a complete symmetry between matter and antimatter, which is why the universe should not exist. Author Christian Sumora from Japanese Riken Institute. This is also part of the Max Planck Institute and stuff like that. This comes from classic quantum computing, the Standard Model, which obviously is wrong. When you come to this conclusion, you're supposed to know, be smart enough to know that your science has reached a dead end. Now, video series 1 on the physics, I had a whole bunch of more that prove that this model, this matter theory of existence is wrong. Blatantly wrong, and they should have figured this thing out a long time ago. I use this figure on the cover of the book. There's a female shape here. There's a reason why. Let's say you're going to create and write an operating system, right? And you want to create your own little galaxy. So an operating system, these are some of the things you're going to have in it. You'd first have a program that state all the parameters for the galaxy, such as the hardware and I/O ports, import, output stuff. Next, you'd have to come out and define the memory management of the program and the timing cycles in the system. If you remember, one of the repeated verses that Moses used in the very beginning of verses, like 180 some odd times, it has to do with time. Next, you would have to define all the dimensions and what would create each one and their features. To review the theory of multidimensional reality, the third dimension is the world of inanimate matter. The fourth is us, fourth dimensional beings. Pretty helpless. We have to use our senses in order to receive information. We have to use our mouth to talk and communicate. We have to do everything physical. A fifth dimensional being was something beyond an Uri Geller, where you have so much potential, energy, and you're able to access information from the diehole that you're able to read other people's thoughts, communicate without verbally talking, be able to move objects without physically touching them, and I don't know what else you could do. It's basically gathering information. That's the difference between the different dimensions, and it's an exponential increase. And each one of those sides on the 8 pyramid, or the 4, each one of those sides represents another dimension and an exponential increase in energy and information. The 6 would be a person, an entity, I don't think at all a person, I guess I will, that has no body. He or she is strictly information in this diehole, in this computer. And he perceives everything as the information exists in the diehole. That's a lot different. And the reason I mention it now is because you're going to see what I'm getting at next in the Garden of Eden story what Moses was really telling us. The next in this, you'd have to also include all the building blocks of your universe, which are the atoms that make up matter. And we have enough repeated verses starting someplace after Genesis that has to do, as Exodus, Leviticus, and Numbers, that appear to repeat themselves, matching the number of elements in the periodic table. Now, a civilization that's millions of years more advanced than us, you can't assume they're going to group the elements the same way we do. But it's close enough, and I got enough hints that, yeah, it looks like it does. In fact, the four letters that we least use, I think, are the 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th dimensions. Back to dimensions, the 7th would be a planet, and an 8th would be a star. Both things exist in time and space. Both have a lot of energy. The star has much, much more. And I believe the stars create the planets. So anyway, that's how I define dimensions, different from everybody else. Anyway, the operating system would also have to have the information for male and female and all the animals and stuff like that. But it's an operating system. It has no sex unto itself, but it has the information to create the sexes. Okay, I'm going to start decoding Genesis. That's where it all starts. I'm going to read it. Now, I did a literal translation of the Torah, not the normal one that they have, because I discovered some of the words that they use are not really correct. Anyway, and the ones I've replaced are the ones underlined, and you'll see why in a second. In Genesis 2:18, and he is saying, Yahweh Elohim, not good to be of the Adam, it's Aleph, Demin, Mim is actually how they spell it. So Adam, to be alone, I shall make for him helper as in front of him. This is when Adam is supposedly naming the animals that appear, that God creates, and he names them. So, but he doesn't have anybody. Verse 2:20, and for Adam not to be found helper in front of him, and he is causing to fall Yahweh Elohim, that's God, Yahweh is Yod He Vav He, Elohim, sleep on the Adam, and he is sleeping, and he is taking one from hip. Now the way they translate this word, it's rib, but it's not. The word is, literally the word is hip or side. Now there's a reason why. I looked it up in a forensics books, and a forensic examiner, in order to get good DNA, they don't go to a rib. That's one of the last places they'd ever go. They first go to a tooth, a live tooth. If not, they go to the pelvis, which is connected to the hip. It's a whole assembly. They go there for the DNA. Now also what's interesting, the hip pelvis assembly is the obvious difference between male and female. The male has a longer tail, the female doesn't. It's shorter so they can give birth. Anyway, go on. Hip of him, and he is closing flesh under her. It literally was the word her. So is it him or is it her, what? And he is building Yahweh Elohim, the hip, which he took from the Adam to woman, and he is bringing her to the Adam. Some places they actually translate this as human. Again, they don't really know what to make of this thing, and I don't blame the rabbis or anybody else. You'd have no idea what this thing's really about. An operating system does not have a sex, but it contains the information, like I said. The first Adam was a hermaphrodite. It had both sexes. I mean, it's an operating system. It doesn't have a sex, but has the information of male and female. So what it even says that in Genesis 1:27, it says, God created Adam in his image as one whole or complete. Now that is the correct translation. It was a whole. It was one unit. Surely after God created man, it must have been obvious this ain't going to work. No way they're going to be able to reproduce and multiply on the earth. So he fixed it. So this is how he winds up fixing it. This is a painting from the late 1500s. This is gorgeous. This is when you had an artist that really was an artist. Anyway, Genesis 2:17. And from tree of knowledge of good and evil, not you shall eat from him, that in day of to eat of you from him to die you shall die. I know it's awkward. This is the literal translation. 3:1. And the serpent, he became crafty. There's more to it after, but who cares? 3:2. And she is saying, the woman to the serpent, from the fruit, the garden we are eating, 3:3, and from the fruit of the tree which in midst of the garden, he said, Elohim, not you shall eat from him. And it was interesting. They gave the tree a personality, a gender, him. Interesting. Not to die. Keep that in mind. It's important. Serpent said, 3:4, and he is saying, the serpent to the woman, not to die you shall not die. That one knowing Elohim in that day of to eat of you from him, and they are unclosed eyes. Now, in other words, they had closed eyes. They don't see the reality for what it really is, because they're in the die hold. They're seeing only information, not the creation. Of you, and you become as Elohim, one knowing of good and evil. Remember, it's supposed to be the tree of good and evil. Well, information is not good, it's not bad, it's how you use the information. I'll continue, 3:6. And she is seeing the woman that good, the tree for food, and that yearning, he to eyes and being covered, the tree to make intelligent. Remember that. And she is taking from fruit of him being the tree, and she is eating, and she is giving moreover to man of her with her, and he is eating. Hence, he ate the apple. But you'll find out it's not an apple. And there was no serpent. You'll find out what it is in a second. First of all, was the snake really a snake? No. It was a literary device that Moses used. The other two places, I'll stand over here, you can read the thing. I'll just tell you what it is. The two places that the snake and the rod show up together is first when Moses is in the cave after he sees the burning bush, which is really probably a hologram. And God says, what's in your hands? And he says, a rod. And then God later says, throw the rod on the ground, and it becomes a serpent. The second time it shows up is when Moses is standing in front of the Pharaoh. The Pharaoh was Amenhotep IV. He later changes his name to Akhenaten. And on 4:17, God says to Moses to use the rod to do the signs. And that was to do all the plagues. And when I do the book on the Exodus book, in there, I'll cover the command structure that Moses is told to give the rod to make these plagues happen. Now that's important. The third time the rod shows up with the serpent is when he's standing in front of the Pharaoh, Amenhotep IV, and he throws the rod down, it becomes a serpent, eats the other two serpents of the Pharaoh's magicians. The point being is this. This is a literary device used by Moses. He's telling you, remember the first time we talk about the serpent? It wasn't the serpent. It was the rod. I guess I'll still sit on this side. My apples don't look too good. They're supposed to look better than that. The tree of knowledge of good and evil. As the Hebrew word to kill, which means eat or consume, mentioned in Genesis 3:6. If you break the word apart, by swapping the letters chi for the adjacent letter yud, you get ayil, which means power or strength. If we use the first two letters, ta, we get chamber or room. If we take the last two letters, kol, you get a whole or totally. The words whole or totally may be why some of the translators says total information. You know, totality of everything. After analysis, we get the impression that they did not really eat anything, but they went into a room, a structure, that could give them total power or total information by using the rod. And that's the key part. That's really the hidden story that's going on here. Now, the reason why I was able to swap letters, it's one of the 10 codes that Moses used when he was writing the surface story of the Torah. And I cover that in the book and the video that'll be Moses and the 10 code systems. A few rabbis know of that particular code, the adjacent letter swaps. Okay, the apple. I'll go over here. Here's a cross-section of an apple. How do you like that? I elongated one of my toroids. Gee, what do you think? See the similarity? So what's Moses really saying here? He's saying it wasn't an apple. It was the letters that make up the Torah and really what this thing is. That's what he was saying. So the snake wasn't the snake, it was the rod, which we are introduced to later twice. The tree was not a tree, it was a room that they went into, and they did something with the rod. And then finally, the apple wasn't the apple, it was this. It was an analogy telling you something about the Hebrew alphabet, and this is how matter comes into this dimension. If you go to video series 1 on the physics stuff, you'll see it plainly. Who are the people and the different dimensions? I defined already the dimensions, so I will go into it later. Before we go into this, well, I'll cover this. I'm going to basically relieve dear sweet Eve of supposedly the first sin. Remember, the Torah is a cover story intended for late Bronze Age people, not us. I mean, it's clues in there, but still deal with it. So, Genesis 3:7 states, their eyes were opened. Well, what does that mean? Well, like I said a little earlier, if you're in the die hole, you just see the domains of information that make things up. Trees, yourself, rocks, everything. It's just domains of information. Maybe it looks something like the bubbles of light in the phantom leaf effect in Kirlian photography. So when they came out, how come it says their eyes were open? All of a sudden they then see the physical world. Gee, how do you like that? The vibrant colors of the leaves, the ground, the sky, the sun, and everything else that they didn't see before. Never. Oh, back. 3:7. They saw that they were naked. The sentence which says they started with, and then they say they sewed fig leaves together to make clothing. So we don't know why. It's interpreted shame and stuff like that. Hell. They were in the die hole for an indeterminate period of time, and they had no shame. Why should they change all of a sudden? Well, it gives you the answer to the next part of the verse. It says, God was walking in the garden in the cool of the day. Gee, why do we wear clothing? I'll stand on this side. Why do we wear clothing? To get warm, right? We want to freeze our rear ends off. Some of us also wear clothing because we aren't too happy with or embarrassed by our bodies. But that's aside the issue. But that's the reason why we wear clothing, and that's why they were doing. Now the flip side of this stuff is this. You have to think the flip side. That means the condition they had before they went into that room and did something, they had no sensation of hot and cold. Gee, no body. Next, God told the woman, I will greatly multiply thy pain and thy travail. In pain thou shalt bring forth children. That means before whatever they did, they had no sensation of pain. That means, again, no body. And thy desire shall be to thy husband. There is a difference between if you had no body and it's just information in the die hold, and then when you have a body and the endocrine system and all the other systems that create emotions and love and hate and stuff like that, totally different. They react differently, and that's what here. Again, it implies no emotions or different kind of emotions. That means no body beforehand. 3:17, in Torah thou shalt eat of it all the days of thy life. Thou shalt eat the herb of the field. In other words, you got to go become a farmer and get food from the land. But that means the flip side, before they did whatever they did in that room, they didn't have to eat. That means no body again. Thou shalt surely die, which is mentioned chapter 2, verse 17 earlier. That means the flip side, they weren't designed to die. Well, you wouldn't die because your information, you're basically a program or subroutine of the die hold. There's no reason you'd die. The problem with the six-dimensional beings is they remember everything. That's a key part. This actually tells you why the universe was built, was created, why our die hold was made. And I'll explain that in the end of this video. You're going to know the three great secrets of the universe. These people, like I said here, were either six-dimensional beings or very highly advanced fifth-dimensional beings. I know for sure they were six when they started out, and I believe they de-evolved to fifth-dimensional beings because the story in the Hebrew scriptures says they lived a very long time. You would have a very strong mind-body connection if you were a fifth-dimensional being. That's why you would live a very long time. Genesis 3:22, and God said, behold, the man is become as one of us to know good and evil. And now, lest he put forth his hand, what was in his hand? The rod. And take also of the tree of life and live forever. That's telling you one of the reasons why our die hold was built. But it also tells you, again, that that tool, that rod, given the right commands, would have made a fifth-dimensional being live forever. They didn't really want that. At least those that were six-dimensional beings did not want that. So whatever happened in that room, and it certainly wasn't a tree, I think I convinced you of that, the codes and the clues he gives us, Moses, indicate this was not a room, the tree is not a tree. Okay, dating the technology and these people. It's hard, it's a good guess. The difference between Homo sapiens and what came before, human-like things, were about 4.8 million years from then to something that looks somewhat human, another 130,000 years, we think, we guess, to become like man today. The question is, how long would it take us to evolve to fifth-dimensional beings, that you're able to move objects just with your mind, communicate telepathically, etc., etc.? I don't know. 3 million years, 4, 5 million years, maybe longer. Then how about to go from a fifth-dimensional being to a sixth-dimensional being where you have no body? You're just an existence in the die hold. 20 million, 10 million, 50 million years? I don't know. It could be a very long time. We just don't know. The society, obviously, that Adam and Eve came from. These just represents a society, but maybe it does represent two people. Now, I'll tell you one thing regarding dear sweet Eve getting blamed for the first sin. Catholic Church likes to do that. Six-dimensional beings do not make mistakes like that. They knew exactly what they were doing. And there was a reason why they did it. And if you think you're an old soul, you might have a recollection in a dream or a feeling that you too made some kind of a decision also to de-evolve, or there was another route to go. And I think I'm going to tell you why, and it's wrapped up in, again, Adam, or man, why man was created. Okay, what is the Torah? The Torah is a computer program meant for a quantum computer of some sort. We've only been doing computer technology since the late 40s. It's only been 70 years. Imagine societies and what their computers would be like 5, 8, 10, 20 million years in the future. I'm pretty sure of looking at the shape that the letters make, it's for a quantum computing, strictly a light-based computer. 2, people that created it either were very highly advanced fifth-dimensional beings or sixth-dimensional beings. That's for sure. 3, the technology they possessed was many millions of years beyond ours, but was loaned to Moses in the form of the rod to perform the signs in Egypt and communicate with God. Before the ark was built, Moses is talking to somebody. He's talking to God. The only thing he had in his possession was that rod. In other words, I want you to appreciate this. The civilization that created this is a page from the Torah. There's no accent marks, you notice. They knew the computer program that makes up our diehole, that creates our universe, that they're in. And they were able to build devices that were able to hook into the operating system, our operating system, to make things work in this dimension. That's what's amazing about it. It's also amazing that the operating system of this entire universe would even talk to us, but he evidently did. Because that's what these people made. They had a device that enabled them to communicate with the operating system. The Crystalline Device looked like, there was, on top of the Ark of the Covenant, there was a device. If you read the thing carefully in the legends, it looks somewhat like a modern chair. When you see the video on, I think it's volume 3 of the book on the Exodus, you'll actually see what I think this thing looked like. It's the closest description that anyone's ever gotten. And it's a crystalline device, it's blue, and it acted both as the computer as well as probably the power supply. And it made the thing work. And I figured out what they were building was basically a flame speaker. That's what this whole thing was about, but you'll learn about it later. Anyway, that what was on top of the ark, and that did enable Moses to unbelievably talk to the operating system of the universe. 5, we only have a small beginning part of this program, but Moses gave us enough clues what kind of program it is. Now, the reason I'm pretty sure it's the beginning of this program is because how the thing was constructed and the repeating verses in the thing. And he also tells us the first letter is that resh, but that's the second letter. It's bat resh, and it goes on from there. And that's how supposedly the universe was built. I'm going to go into the legends in a few minutes and answer all of them. This program either is loaded into a quantum computer or built within it. That's what I don't really know yet. Is this computer program tell someone how to build the crystals and dope it with certain elements to make this thing work, or what? We don't know. Or is it a device you just program the thing and it works on the crystals you've already set up? We don't know. We actually have to see one of these things. When this quantum computer is turned on, it creates a whole new universe within it. That is what causes the Big Bang. Our Big Bang, where it said nothing became something, that's when someone turned it on. Now, they turn it on, they get two answers. And I'm going to go to the secret of the universe at the end of this video. You'll know it. But that's the Big Bang. Someone turned on our diode and it played out. The operating system in the computer becomes God in that universe. In other words, the Torah is a small part of a larger program that when it is turned on, it becomes God. So you're looking at the commands, hopefully the letters are right, that creates God within a quantum computer. Now right now everybody's brain is either melting down or pausing, but that's really what you're looking at. And when I go through the legends, you'll see Moses is saying the same thing. He must have been told a lot that we don't know about. It shows up in the legends, but he was constrained by what kind of a surface story he could put on this thing because he couldn't change any of the letters. Can't add any, can't subtract any, nothing. Oh, now you know why the Torah is so holy, because you're looking at the program that creates God. That's mind-blowing. Okay. One of the questions I had, okay, you got a computer program that's the operating system. But where's the RAM? Where's the memory management? You know, what is it using for RAM? And here it's creating billions of stars. This is a model, NASA's model of a quasar. Notice the toroid model shape again? Isn't that interesting? This is only supposed to be the diameter of one solar system, or maybe 0.1 light years. Of course, here. Tiny, but it's belching out tens of billions of stars before this thing starts rotating and making the classic galaxy. So, you know, the question is what's doing the memory? Well, if you remember what I said about dimensions, each one is divided by how much potential it has and also the amount of information that it can access and manipulate and communicate with. So what's the ultimate? When these things are being created, a quasar opens up and it creates a galaxy. And what's it pouring out? It's pouring out stars. Here's an example. This is galaxy, what is it? Hercules A galaxy is 2.1 billion light years away. New galaxy out of a quasar. This isn't dust, folks. If you see it, it's 2.1 billion light years away. Those are stars. This is before this thing starts rotating. This is stars. Otherwise, you wouldn't see it. Now, the stars every 12,068 years, nova, and it throws off its dust shell, and that creates dust. And every galaxy, like our own galaxy, is supposed to be 200 to 300 billion stars. Was pouring these things out. This is interesting. I included this in Series 1. I think it was the last video, was 1G. Astronomers put in a database all 100 quasars, and they noticed that it inexplicably lined up in this kind of an interesting pattern. Isn't this interesting? This is like looking at a neural network. This is, again, astronomers put this together. They mapped all the stars and galaxies they had, and they come up with this kind of a pattern. And this represents billions of stars, billions upon billions of stars. Each one of these are whole galaxies, so I don't know, it's going to be a very big number. This, courtesy of the Germans, I'll read it. A picture of nerve cells which play an important role in learning. The neurons of the hippocampus, one of the evolutionary's oldest structures of the brain, are particularly involved in memory formation. They develop a hyper-branched network that makes it possible to create and retrieve memories. Dr. Ahmed Sabrina Ilker, Germany. if you notice the similarities, what's true for the microcosmic is true for the macrocosmic. Why? Because it's the same program, folks. That's what you're looking at. You want to know where the memory is? It's the stars. That's the thing that's storing the information. Probably the planets too, because the stars create the planets. Okay, clues. This is the Legends of the Jews, and I'll read it again for those who have cell phones. 1. The Torah was written before God created the earth or the universe. Quote, God already had the Torah with him in the form of all the letters before he created the world. He's saying an operating system. There's no question about it. Before they turned on the thing, they had to have the program, right? Of course. 2. All of the words and all of the actions of all the worlds are contained in the Torah. I could replace this by saying universe. Again, the same thing. Storage of information, processing and stuff like that, same thing. Now the Torah itself doesn't, but what the Torah creates, all those stars in the universe, that seems to be where the storage is. 3. The Torah is the book of life. 2 interpretations. 1, I'm sure it's the carbon atom is what this thing is based on. And also, it's an explosion of life. The minute you turn this thing on, it's untold trillions of lives that are created. You can even look, Eastern philosophy used to say that the planets and the stars are creations, are entities. And some, I'm told, in the Hindu religion, believe that you could evolve to a planet or eventually a star. By my definition of dimensions, you're probably right. 4, the Torah is the cause of the world's creation and also the power that maintains its existence. Again, think in terms of a computer and operating system. Naturally, the operating system has to keep working in order to create the thing that it's controlling and you're seeing and living in. You know, that's what it says. There's another saying, as long as God thinks the universe, it exists. Absolutely true. To understand who God is, you must understand the Torah. I just explained it. We're looking at a small piece of a program. When turned on, it becomes God in that dihold for those people, just like ours is. 6, the only book you can compare to the Torah is the Torah itself, because there is no other book like the Torah. I don't even have to explain that. You already know the answer. Yes. Okay, now the 3 goodies. As far as I know, the theory of multidimensional reality is the only one that can explain all 3. But your matter theory of existence can't even remotely hope to. That's why you should also know you have no place to go with that matter theory of existence. It's dead. 1, why was the universe created? Let me explain. A highly advanced civilization, I call them the builders, built a dihold computer, a quantum computer, and loaded it in and turned it on, and it created our universe. Why did they do that? They wanted to get 2 answers out of it. The first one, you get almost immediately, less than a millisecond, depending on the speed of this thing, which is extremely fast. It may even be picoseconds for all I know. You want to find out if the program you put into it is the same one that the beings came up with and come back out and report back to you. If that happens, then you know that the program, the operating system, must permeate all levels of existence. Probably it's the distance between the atoms themselves and the molecules. It's like standing waves, but it's the program, and it permeates all levels of existence. There's another part. I'm going to answer it when I get to number 3, and you'll understand why. If God created the universe, then who created God? I'm saying the God in our universe, in our dihold, is a computer program. So is that God? It's like, I'll give you an analogy. Let's say you take a computer program and you copy it, let's say 1,000 times onto CDs. And then you take that CD, and, well, you take the first one, you load it into a computer, you make another copy. Then you take that copy to another computer and take that and load it into another computer and copy that. It's like you're standing in front of two parallel mirrors. You see yourself into infinity. Do you care if you're the 100th copy or the 1,000th or the billionth copy? It's almost the same copy. But therefore, you don't care and don't lessen the value of when I say it's God. What it does tell you, though, is that the very first universe was the product of a thought form by some entity, a thought form. And that permeated all levels of existence. Now the big one. What is man's purpose in the universe? Well, the clues were given if you were to live forever. Imagine you were reincarnated not 50 times, 100 times, not 1,000 times. What if you were reincarnated 5 or 10 million times, or even 300 million times? At some point, you will have seen every form of reincarnation, every form of life, every kind of government, good, bad. And the bad part is when you're a six-dimensional being, you remember all of it. There's nothing to stop you from remembering it. In fact, those who die, and fourth-dimensional beings, us, die, they say they recalled everything, and their brain that may have had dementia or something like that wasn't the problem. They remembered absolutely everything. So imagine you're a six-dimensional being, and you remember everything you did. The good, the bad, and the ugly, and the stuff you're not too proud of. Well, at some point, it'd be so insane that you'd do anything to forget. When I figured this out, it left me emotionally flat. But I think there was a way out for these six-dimensional beings. I think there's probably a software off switch in this six-dimensional realm. And it's possible, I don't think if they flicked it, it would have turned it off. Because we're still going, and you saw how big and vast this universe is among all those countless trillions of entities. Somebody would have done it. But I think it's like a branch. You decide, okay, and they become probably a planet next to seventh dimensional being. And that's their out. But they could never go back and be human again. And I think many of us have done this many times maybe. That's what these characters, Adam and Eve, did, is they made a conscious decision to de-evolve, to forget. And that's why they do it. When I figured that out, before I figured, okay, maybe they're becoming six-dimensional beings, it left me emotionally flat that that's all there is. But now I don't think the universe ever shuts down. I think it just keeps expanding and expanding. You saw there's no problem with memory. It's just each one of these quasars is producing, billions of stars. Ours has 200 to 300 billion. Each one's creating planets. I mean, that's a lot of entities, a lot of storage. Anyway, that's the end of it. I've gone 45 minutes, I'm sorry. Dial Foundation, nonprofit science foundation. We're going to have more of these. The next one's going to be on gravity and my experiments in the Oregon vortex and Santa Cruz mystery spot, showing the connection between mass, time, and matter. Hope you enjoyed it. Tell your friends. Subscribe if you can.